I'm Jason Whitaker. I'm 38. I live in Columbus, Ohio. And for most of my adult life, I have been the kind of person who believed that routine was the same thing as safety. I work a steady job. I pay the mortgage. I fix whatever breaks before it becomes a problem. And I've been married to Megan for 9 years. Megan is 34, Megan Bennett before she took my last name. And together we have Harper, our 7-year-old daughter who still sleeps with a nightlight and still believes every story I make up at bedtime. Our life is not flashy, but it has always felt real, like something you can put your hands on and trust. That random Tuesday night started like 100 others. Harper had finally gone down after turning bedtime into negotiations. Megan was in the shower, and I was on the couch with my phone resting against my knee, doing that mindless scrolling that feels harmless because it is so ordinary. I was in a local community group, the kind where people post about lost dogs, garage sales, school fundraisers, and which plumber actually shows up. I wasn't looking for anything. I was just letting my brain shut off for a minute. Then I saw a comment under a post about a new coffee place opening. It was a short, flirty reply with a bunch of laughing emojis, nothing shocking on its own. The profile picture beside it made my thumb stop mid-scroll so abruptly it felt like my whole arm froze. It was Megan's face. Not kind of like her, not someone who resembled her from a distance, but her exact face. The same hazel eyes that catch the light in the kitchen when she leans against the counter. The same dimple on her left cheek that shows up when she tries to hold back a smile. The same slightly uneven curve of her upper lip that I've kissed 1,000 times. For a few seconds, my brain refused to process it, like it was trying to protect me by insisting it had to be a coincidence. People look alike. Photos can be stolen. Maybe someone used her picture. That was the rational thought I clung to, even while a colder part of me already knew it wasn't that simple. I tapped the profile. The page loaded, and the name at the top hit me like a physical shove. Megan Harper. Not Megan Whitaker. Not Megan Bennett. Megan Harper. Listed as single. Age 29. Location: Charlotte, North Carolina. My first reaction was this dumb, disoriented laugh that never even made a sound, because it felt so ridiculous my body tried to reject it. Megan was 34. Megan was married to me. Megan was 34 and married and lived in the house I was sitting in Columbus, Ohio. And Harper was our child, not just a name you borrow for a fake identity. Seeing it there, right under a profile photo, was like someone had reached into my chest and pinched something vital between their fingers. I scrolled down, and the nausea started to build in real time, like my stomach was trying to climb up into my throat. There were photos, not a handful, not some old album someone forgot about, but a steady stream. Selfies taken in good lighting, selfies taken from angles I recognized because I had watched her do it before, tilting her chin just so, turning slightly to the right, letting her hair fall over one shoulder. There were outfits I'd seen her wear when we went out. There was the black dress she bought last year for my company's holiday party. There was the denim jacket she always insists still fits. There was even the faded Ohio State hoodie she steals from me. The details were so familiar that they made the unfamiliar parts feel even worse. Her wedding ring was gone in every photo. Her left hand was either conveniently out of frame or posed in a way that made it impossible to see her finger. In a couple shots where her hands were visible, I could see the pale line where her ring should have been, a small absence that felt louder than anything else on the screen. Then I noticed the background. The corner of our living room with the same gray walls we painted 2 summers ago. The same lamp with a crooked shade that I've meant to replace. The same little slice of our hallway visible behind her shoulder. In one photo, I could tell she was standing by the kitchen island because the pattern of the countertop matched ours exactly, but the camera was angled so that the fridge covered the spot where Harper's drawings are usually taped up with magnets. In another, there was a glimpse of the staircase, but it was cropped just enough that you couldn't see the family photos we have hung along the wall, the ones that show Harper missing her front teeth and Megan squinting in the sun at the zoo. It wasn't just that she had an online presence I didn't know about. It was that she had clearly thought about what needed to be removed. It was that she had taken our real life and edited it like it was an inconvenient stain. I kept scrolling. Captions. Filtered, glossy captions that sounded like a stranger trying on Megan's voice. Single life looks good on me. New city, new me. Taking applications for someone who can keep up. Every line felt like it had been written to erase the version of her that belonged to our home. Like the wife and mother part was something she could switch off by changing a last name and a location. The follower count made my chest tighten. Hundreds of men. Not random empty accounts either, but real profiles with faces, comments, conversations. The comments were a mix of thirsty compliments and overly familiar jokes, and she responded to every single one. I watched my wife's typing patterns in real time on a screen, the same playful punctuation, the same way she drags out words when she's teasing, the same little smiley faces she uses in text to me when she wants something. One guy wrote that she looked dangerous, and she replied with a laughing emoji and told him he had no idea. Another asked if she was really single, and she replied that she was as single as it gets. Another said he was in Charlotte too and asked her to grab drinks, and she didn't ignore it or shut it down. She liked it. She replied with a wink. She kept it going. My hand started shaking, and it wasn't dramatic movie-style shaking. It was subtle at first, like my muscles couldn't decide whether to clench or go numb. I realized I had been holding my breath, and when I finally exhaled, it came out shallow and uneven. The room around me felt too quiet. The television was off, the dishwasher had finished its cycle earlier, and all I could hear was the faint rush of water from the bathroom, where Megan was still showering, completely unaware that a second version of her existed on my screen. I went back to the top and stared at the name again, like my eyes could force it to rearrange itself into something that made sense. Megan Harper, single, 29, Charlotte. Harper, our daughter's name. Seeing it repurposed like that made something twist in me that I still don't have a clean word for. It felt like theft, not just of my trust, but of my kid. Like she had taken the purest part of our life and used it as a prop, a detail, to make her lie feel more believable. I clicked through more posts, hunting for something that would let me breathe, something that would prove it was fake, that it wasn't her, that it couldn't be. But each photo confirmed it in some small, undeniable way. A birthmark on her collarbone. The same tiny scar near her eyebrow from when she tripped over a toy years ago. The same chipped nail on her right thumb that she always complains about. These weren't images scraped from somewhere. These were new, fresh, real. One of the most recent posts was from earlier that day, time-stamped like a taunt. She was in our bedroom. I could tell because the headboard was visible behind her, but the photo was framed so tight you couldn't see the nightstand with our wedding photo. She was smiling into the camera with that practiced softness she uses when she knows she looks good. The caption said, "Single life looks good on me," like it was a joke she could toss out into the world and let strangers applaud. That was the moment my stomach dropped in a way that felt final, like an elevator cable snapping. I sat there on the couch, my phone glowing in my hands, and the life I thought I understood started to feel like something I'd only been renting, something that could be rewritten without my permission while I was sitting 10 feet away. I did not wait for the perfect moment, because there is no perfect moment to confront your wife about living a second life online. So I just sat there on the edge of the couch with my phone in my hand, listening to the water shut off in the bathroom, and feeling like every second stretched thin and sharp. And when she walked out wrapped in a towel with her hair damp and her skin flush from the shower, I said her name in a way that must have sounded different, because she stopped mid-step and looked at me like she already sensed something was wrong. I held up my phone without saying anything else and told her I'd found something, and I watched her face as I turned the screen toward her, and the profile loaded with that name at the top. Megan Harper, single, 29, Charlotte, North Carolina, and I saw the exact second the blood drained from her face because her eyes widened just slightly before she forced them back into something neutral. For a moment, she did not say anything at all, and that silence was louder than if she had shouted, and then she let out a short, breathy laugh that did not match the situation, the kind of laugh people use when they are cornered and hoping to blur the edges of what is happening. She said it's not what you think in a tone that was almost rehearsed, like she had imagined this scenario in her head before and decided on that line as a shield. Hearing it out loud made something inside me tighten, because there was no version of what I was thinking that could possibly be good, and yet she was already trying to reshape it. I asked her to explain, and she moved slowly, almost carefully, as if any sudden motion might shatter something fragile in the room. She sat down across from me, still wrapped in the towel, water dripping from the ends of her hair onto the hardwood floor, and she started talking in this measured, controlled way that she uses when she is presenting something at work. She said it started as a joke, just something stupid and harmless, a way to pass time. She said she had been feeling invisible for a while, that somewhere between school drop-offs, meal planning, and deadlines at the marketing firm in Dayton, she stopped feeling like a person anyone looked at. She said she felt like she had become a role instead of a woman, just Harper's mom, just my wife, just a project manager chasing client revisions. As she spoke, I noticed how she kept using the word just like it minimized everything that made up our life. She said she wanted to feel seen again, wanted to know that someone out there would notice her without the context of being tied to a family. She said when she first made the account, it was almost laughable, like playing dress-up with a fake name and a different age, shaving 5 years off as if time itself was negotiable. She told me she chose Harper as the last name without thinking, that it just came to her, and she insisted there was no deeper meaning behind it. But the fact that our daughter's name was attached to that profile felt deliberate no matter how casually she described it. I asked her about the photos, about the way our house was visible in the background, about the captions declaring she was single, and she said she knew how it looked but that it was never meant to go anywhere real. She said she never met any of the men in person, never gave out our address, never crossed what she considered the physical line. She kept repeating that it was harmless, that she did not cheat, that nothing ever left the screen. She admitted she liked the attention, liked waking up to notifications, liked reading comments from strangers, telling her she was beautiful, magnetic, dangerous. She said it felt like stepping into a version of herself that did not have responsibilities, a version that could flirt and tease without anyone asking about homework or grocery lists. While she talked, I scrolled through the account again, right there in front of her, and read some of her replies out loud. And she flinched at certain lines like hearing them in my voice stripped away whatever illusion she had built around them. She said she never planned to take it beyond messages, that it was contained, controlled, almost like a game. She said she did not realize how much it would hurt me, because in her mind it existed in a separate compartment, one that did not overlap with our real life. Hearing that made something hollow open up in my chest, because our living room had been the backdrop for her fantasy, our bedroom the stage for her single-life performance. And yet she still spoke about separation as if she had managed to build walls that I simply could not see. At one point she reached for my hand, and I pulled it back without even thinking, and that small movement seemed to hit her harder than anything else I'd said. She told me she was sorry, that she should have talked to me about feeling unseen instead of looking for validation from strangers. She said she did not want to lose what we had, that the account meant nothing compared to our family. There were tears in her eyes by then, but I could not tell if they were for me or for the version of herself she was being forced to give up. Then she stood up, grabbed her phone from the kitchen counter, and opened the account while I watched. Her fingers trembled slightly as she navigated through the settings, and she said she would delete it right then. No hesitation. I watched her confirm it, watch the screen flicker, and then reload to a blank login page. Just like that, it was gone. As if erasing it could rewind the past weeks or months of her slipping into that alternate identity while I was asleep in the same bed. The room felt different after that, heavier and oddly quiet. She wrapped her arms around herself, still in the towel, and said again that it was never physical, that she never cheated, that she just wanted to feel seen. I understood the words individually, but together they did not fix anything. The problem was not just whether she met someone or crossed a physical boundary. The problem was that she had built a secret space where I did not exist, where Harper did not exist, where our marriage was something to be hidden or denied for the sake of compliments from men who believed they were talking to a single woman. That night, I lay in bed next to her, staring at the ceiling, aware of the steady rhythm of her breathing beside me and the space between us that felt wider than the mattress. The account was deleted, the profile gone, the evidence wiped clean with a few taps of her finger, but the images were burned into my mind. Every filtered selfie, every caption about single life, every flirtatious reply replayed on a loop I could not turn off. Deleting an account took seconds. Undoing the shift in how I saw her felt impossible. Trust, I realized, does not have a settings menu or a confirmation button. It does not disappear and reappear on command. It lingers in the quiet, altered, and uncertain, long after the screen goes dark. A week after she deleted the account, after the apologies and the quiet promises and the careful way she started leaving her phone face up on the counter like that alone could rebuild something, she told me she had to work late. She said it casually while rinsing dishes after dinner, like it was a minor inconvenience, like it was just another Tuesday swallowed by deadlines and client demands. She mentioned a last-minute project, something about a campaign revision that needed to go out first thing in the morning. Her voice was steady, practiced, the same tone she had used the night I confronted her, and that alone made something in my chest tighten because it sounded too smooth. Since the account incident, I had not become paranoid in the dramatic sense, but I had become aware in a way I had never been before. Every small detail seemed sharper. The way she typed messages and angled her screen away slightly without realizing it. The way she paused before answering certain questions, as if filtering her words more carefully than usual. I hated that I noticed these things. I hated that I was looking for them. When she left that evening, she kissed Harper on the forehead, told her not to wait up, and gave me a quick peck that felt more like habit than connection. I watched her taillights disappear down the street and stood there a second longer than necessary before closing the door. The house felt too quiet again, the same kind of quiet from the night I found the profile. Around 9, after Harper was asleep and the clock on the stove seemed to tick louder than usual, I opened my phone and pulled up the shared location app. We had turned it on years ago for convenience, for safety, for those normal married reasons that do not carry suspicion. I told myself I was just checking to see how much longer she might be, just trying to plan when to expect her home. Her blue dot was not where it should have been. It was not at the office building in Dayton that she always worked from, not even in the general vicinity. It was across town, in the short North District, clustered among the tight grid of streets known for art galleries, boutiques, and cafes that stay open late. I stared at the map as if it might correct itself. I zoomed in, zoomed out, refreshed it. The dot stayed put, hovering over a small cafe I did not recognize. She had never mentioned going there. In 9 years, I could count on one hand the times she spent an evening in short North without me, and those were usually planned outings with friends. This was different. This was presented as overtime at the office. I felt that same slow drop in my stomach, not as sudden as the first discovery, but deeper, more resigned. I grabbed my keys before I could overthink it, told myself I just needed to see for myself. The drive felt longer than it should have, every red light stretching my nerves tighter. I kept replaying her explanation from a week earlier, the insistence that it had been harmless, that it never crossed into real life. I wanted that to be true so badly that it almost hurt. When I pulled into Short North, the streets were lit with that warm urban glow, strings of lights hanging over patios, people walking in small groups, laughter spilling out of doorways. I parked half a block away from the location marker and sat for a second, staring at the steering wheel. My hands were already tense before I even stepped out of the car. The cafe was small, with big front windows that made the interior visible from the sidewalk. I did not march up to the door. I did not prepare a speech. I just walked slowly, each step heavier than the last, until I could see inside. She was there. She was sitting at a small table near the window, her hair down instead of pulled back the way she usually wore it for long workdays, her posture relaxed in a way I had not seen in weeks. Across from her sat a man I had never seen before. Early 40s, maybe, clean-cut, well-dressed in a way that suggested confidence rather than effort. He leaned forward slightly as he talked, one hand resting casually near his coffee cup, the other occasionally gesturing as he spoke. But it was not him that hit me first. It was her face. She was smiling. Not the polite, measured smile she had been giving me lately, not the tight-lipped version that comes with forced normalcy. This was different. It was open. It reached her eyes. It was the kind of smile I remembered from the early years of our marriage, from nights when we stayed up too late talking about nothing and everything, from before routines and responsibilities layered over us like sediment. I stood there on the sidewalk, half hidden by the reflection in the glass, and watched them. They were not sitting stiffly like colleagues in a formal meeting. They leaned in. They held eye contact. At one point she laughed, tilting her head slightly to the side in that familiar way that used to feel like it belonged to me. Then he reached across the small space between them and touched her hand. It was not dramatic. It was not a grab or a bold move. It was light, almost testing, his fingers resting over hers as he said something I could not hear. And she did not pull away. She did not stiffen or glance around nervously. She let his hand stay there, and her smile softened into something quieter but deeper. That single moment felt louder than any argument could have been. I did not go inside. I did not burst through the door or demand explanations in front of strangers. I just turned away and walked back to my car in a daze, the sounds of the district muffled and distant. When I sat behind the wheel, I gripped it so tightly my knuckles turned white, my jaw clenched so hard it hurt. I stared straight ahead, replaying the image over and over as if my mind was determined to carve it into permanence. I told myself there could be an explanation, that maybe this was a client, maybe the touch was nothing, maybe I was misreading what I saw. But the weight in my chest told me I was not misreading it. It was the same instinct that had told me the profile was real before I even clicked it. She came home later than usual. She walked in with the faint scent of coffee and something sweeter on her clothes, and she told me the meeting had run long, that her boss appreciated her staying late. I looked at her as she spoke, searching her face for a crack, for a flicker of guilt. She met my eyes steadily, her expression calm, and something inside me shifted further away. It did not take long to find out who he was. I did not confront her that night. Instead, I went back through the fragments I had gathered over the past week, small details she had mentioned in passing, names from conferences, cities she had traveled to. 6 months earlier, she had attended a marketing conference in Chicago and talked about meeting interesting people, about networking opportunities. One name had come up more than once in casual conversation back then, mentioned with a certain respect in her voice. Ethan Caldwell, a consultant, early 40s, based out of another city, but traveling often. It did not take much effort to connect the dots once I allowed myself to look at them directly. The man in the cafe matched the photos I found, the same composed posture, the same confident half-smile. Sitting there in the dim light of our living room later that night, listening to Megan move around upstairs, I realized that whatever had started as an online fantasy had not stayed confined to a screen. The location ping had not lied. The smile had not lied. And the space between what she said and what I saw had grown into something I could no longer pretend was harmless. When I finally confronted her about the cafe, about the man whose hand had rested so comfortably over hers, she did not crumble the way she had the first time. She stayed seated at the kitchen table, her back straight, her expression controlled, and she said his name before I even had to. Ethan. She said it like it was harmless, like it was a name I was supposed to recognize without attaching weight to it. She told me he was just helping her with career advice, that after the conference in Chicago they had stayed loosely in touch, that he had experience branching out as a consultant, and she valued his perspective. She said she did not tell me about meeting him because she knew how it would look, because after the fake profile incident, anything involving another man would sound worse than it was. That phrase, how it would look, echoed in my head long after she said it. It sounded less like regret and more like strategy, like the issue was optics rather than reality. She described the cafe meeting as spontaneous, a quick chance to catch up while he was in town, nothing secretive beyond the fact that she did not want to trigger another argument at home. She insisted the touch I saw was innocent, a moment of emphasis in conversation, nothing romantic. She maintained eye contact the entire time she spoke, and I almost admired the steadiness of it. But something in me had already shifted into a colder, more methodical place. Words were no longer enough. Apologies were no longer enough. I needed something solid. Later that night, after she went upstairs, I sat at the kitchen counter with her laptop in front of me. She had been careful before, careful enough to crop out wedding photos and delete an entire persona in front of my eyes. But careful does not mean flawless. I did not go digging through messages first. I started with something simpler. Her browser history. There it was. Not just random searches or work-related tabs, but repeated visits to a new Instagram login page. A different username than the one I had discovered before. The first account had been deleted, wiped clean in a moment of visible remorse. But this was something else. This was recent, active. I felt a strange mix of dread and confirmation as I logged in using the saved credentials. The profile loaded slowly, and when it did, the familiarity hit me like déjà vu layered over betrayal. Different username, slightly altered bio, but the same photos, the same angles, the same filtered light and careful cropping, the same narrative of a single woman rediscovering herself, unattached, free. This time, there was no pretense of Charlotte, North Carolina. The location was vaguer, more ambiguous, but the tone was identical. Single life, fresh starts, not tied down. The captions were crafted with the same flirtatious undertone, the same invitations for engagement. It was not a mistake. It was not a relapse into an old habit she forgot to break. It was a continuation, and Ethan followed her. His name appeared near the top of the followers list, verified, unmistakable. I clicked into the post, and there he was in the comments, not subtle, not distant. Fire emojis under her selfies. Compliments that skirted the edge of intimate without crossing into anything explicit. Inside jokes that hinted at shared conversations beyond the public view. He commented on a photo of her in a red blouse with something about how red had always been her color, and she replied with a winking emoji and a reference to something only they would understand. The ease between them felt practiced. I scrolled further back and realized the timeline aligned too neatly to ignore. The first fake account had been active before the cafe meeting. She had deleted it when I discovered it. And then, shortly after, this new account appeared. Same behavior, same curated single identity. But this time, instead of hundreds of random men fueling her validation, the pattern narrowed. The frequency of her posts seemed to align with his activity. She would post, and within minutes he would like it, comment on it, amplify it. It was no longer about generic attention. It was about one specific set of eyes. While I confronted her again, I did not raise my voice. I placed the laptop on the table between us and turned it toward her. I watched the color drain from her face in a way that felt painfully familiar. She did not try to deny it. She did not laugh this time. She admitted that after the conference in Chicago, after they started messaging more frequently, the online persona had shifted. She said it started with innocent conversations about work, about ambitions, about feeling stuck. She said Ethan listened in a way that made her feel understood. She said he saw her potential, talked about possibilities beyond her current role, beyond the routines that defined her days. And somewhere along the way, the account stopped being about random validation and started being about him. She said she posted photos hoping he would see them, hoping he would notice her, hoping he would comment. She admitted that when he did, it gave her a rush she had not felt in years. She described it as feeling chosen, like someone was looking at her not as a wife or a mother, but as a woman with options. As she spoke, she kept her hands clasped tightly together, knuckles pale, as if bracing against something. She swore it was not physical. She said they had only met a handful of times in public places. She insisted there were no hotel rooms, no late-night secret encounters, nothing beyond conversations and a few lingering touches. She said it was emotional, if anything, but not physical. She said she never crossed that final line. The word emotional hung in the air between us like smoke. She seemed to believe that because there had been no undeniable physical act, the damage was somehow contained. But sitting there across from her, looking at the evidence of a relationship built in whispers and filtered photos and coded comments, I felt something deeper than the fear of physical betrayal. I felt replaced in ways that were harder to measure. An emotional affair does not leave lipstick on a collar or receipts in a pocket. It leaves something quieter and more invasive. It seeps into the private corners of conversations, into the parts of yourself you once believed were shared exclusively. She had taken the parts of her that felt restless, ambitious, unseen, and given them to someone else to nurture. She had crafted a version of herself designed to capture his attention and then fed that connection deliberately. She kept repeating that she never slept with him, that it never became that. But the images in my mind were not of bodies in a bed. They were of her smiling at him through a cafe window, of her refreshing Instagram to see if he had commented, of her shaping her identity around the hope that he would notice. In some ways, that cut deeper, because it meant the betrayal was not a single impulsive act. It was sustained, intentional, built over time through choices made again and again. And as I sat there, listening to her promise that it had not turned physical, I realized that the line she had not crossed did not erase the many others she already had. 2 days after she sat across from me at the kitchen table and promised she would cut contact with Ethan completely, after she said she understood how far it had gone and that she would end it for good, she told me she was taking a personal day from work. She said she needed space to think, to clear her head, to process everything that had happened between us. Her voice carried that same fragile steadiness it had adopted lately, the careful tone of someone trying not to tip the scale further. I nodded because arguing in front of Harper was not an option, and because part of me wanted to believe that maybe she truly meant to fix what she had broken. After she left, the house felt suspended in that uneasy quiet that had become normal. I lasted less than an hour before opening the location app again. I hated what I had become, this version of myself checking coordinates like a detective instead of a husband, but hate did not stop my thumb from tapping the screen. Her location was not at a park or a bookstore or anywhere that resembled solitary reflection. It was downtown, hovering over a courtyard hotel. The blue dot pulsed steadily, indifferent to what it represented. For a moment, I just stared at it, as if prolonged focus might transform it into something innocent. Maybe she was meeting a client. Maybe she was there for a conference room rental. Maybe there was some explanation that did not involve the obvious. But the timing, 2 days after promising to cut him off, hollowed out any remaining benefit of the doubt. I did not slam doors or grab my keys in a frenzy this time. The drive downtown felt eerily calm, like the storm had already passed, and I was simply heading toward the wreckage. Traffic lights changed from red to green without me fully registering them. The city skyline rose ahead, glass buildings reflecting a gray afternoon sky that matched the weight in my chest. The hotel came into view, clean and corporate, its sign neutral and unassuming. I pulled into the parking lot, and parked a few rows away from the entrance. I told myself I would wait, that I needed to see with my own eyes rather than rely on assumptions stitched together from digital breadcrumbs. Minutes stretched thin. Cars came and went. Business travelers wheeled suitcases across the pavement. I kept my eyes fixed on the glass doors of the front entrance. Then they walked out together. Megan was laughing. Not the tight, defensive laugh she had used with me recently, but open and unguarded. Ethan was beside her, angled slightly toward her as they moved, their steps unconsciously synchronized. They were standing too close to be accidental, not touching in an obvious way, but close enough that the space between their shoulders felt intimate. Familiar, comfortable. There was no hesitation in their body language, no awkward distance that would suggest a final goodbye. She looked at him the way people look at someone they are connected to, eyes soft, posture relaxed. He leaned down slightly as he said something to her, and she swatted his arm lightly in a gesture that was playful, practiced. Something inside me went very still. I opened the car door and stepped out. Gravel crunched under my shoes, louder in my ears than it probably was in reality. They did not notice me at first. They were too wrapped up in whatever bubble they had created between them. When Megan finally saw me, the change in her expression was immediate and unmistakable. The laughter drained from her face as if someone had flipped a switch. Ethan followed her gaze and straightened, his posture shifting from relaxed to guarded in an instant. I walked toward them without rushing, without shouting. I could feel my pulse in my throat, but my voice, when it came, was level. I stopped a few feet away, close enough to see the faint flush on her cheeks, close enough to smell the faint blend of her perfume and the hotel's sterile air. I did not launch into accusations. I did not demand explanations about rooms or receipts or timelines. I looked at her and asked one question. Are you done? The words felt heavier than they sounded. They carried the weight of every discovery, every lie, every promise made and broken in less than 2 weeks. She blinked, like she needed a second to process that this was real and not a nightmare she could wake up from. She said yes too quickly, then corrected herself, saying she was ending it, that this was exactly what she was doing here. She said she needed closure, that she had to meet him face to face to make it clear there would be no more contact. Her voice wavered slightly, but did not break. Ethan took a small step back, physically distancing himself, as if that alone could absolve him of involvement. His hands lifted in a subtle, placating gesture, the universal body language of someone who does not want to be part of a domestic confrontation. He did not apologize. He did not explain. He simply looked between us with a tight, controlled expression, like this was an inconvenience he preferred to avoid. Megan kept talking, filling the silence with justification. She said she did not want to end things over text. She said she owed it to both of us to handle it maturely. She insisted nothing physical had happened inside that hotel, that they had met in the lobby cafe to talk. She repeated the word closure like it was a shield. But standing there in that parking lot, watching the way they had walked out together, the ease in their movements, the laughter that had still been on her lips seconds before she saw me, closure looked indistinguishable from continuation. It looked like secrecy repackaged as responsibility. I did not yell. I did not create a scene. I just held her gaze and let the silence stretch long enough for the reality of it to settle over all three of us. The hotel loomed behind them, neutral and impersonal, but charged with implication. The promise she had made 2 days earlier echoed in my head, sharp and recent. She stepped toward me then, reaching out as if to bridge the physical gap, but I did not move. I could see the panic flicker in her eyes, the realization that this was no longer confined to hidden accounts and private messages. It was out in the open air, undeniable. Ethan murmured something about giving us space and walked away toward his car without waiting for a response. He did not look back. Megan stood there with me in the parking lot, her hands trembling slightly now, repeating that she was ending it, that she chose our family, that this was the final conversation. She said she knew how bad it looked. She said she understood why I was hurt. She said she would do whatever it took to fix it. But as I stood there, the image that refused to leave my mind was not of a dramatic betrayal behind closed doors. It was of the two of them walking out together, laughing, standing too close, wrapped in a comfort that does not grow overnight. Closure, she called it. From where I stood, it looked a lot like betrayal wearing a calmer face. That night after the hotel parking lot, after the quiet drive home, where neither of us spoke and the air between us felt suffocating, after Harper had already been dropped off at my sister's house for a sleepover so she would not sense the fracture spreading through our home, Megan went to bed early. She said she was exhausted. She said the day had taken everything out of her. I watched her lie down and turn her back to me, her breathing eventually evening out into the slow rhythm of sleep, or at least something that resembled it. I lay there in the dark, staring at the faint outline of the ceiling, listening to the hum of the house settling, and felt something inside me eroding in real time. I had told myself I would not become the kind of husband who checked his wife's phone in the middle of the night. I had told myself that if it reached that point, the marriage was already in deeper trouble than I wanted to admit. But restraint had not protected me so far. Trust had not protected me. So when I finally rolled over and saw her phone resting on the nightstand, screen dark and silent, I did not hesitate as long as I thought I would. My hands were steady in a way that surprised me as I picked it up. The passcode had not changed. That detail felt almost insulting, as if she believed transparency in small things could offset deception in larger ones. The screen lit up softly in the darkness, illuminating the edge of her face as she slept. I went straight to her messages. The thread with Ethan was still there, not deleted, not hidden behind some elaborate disguise. Maybe she thought I would not look. Maybe she believed the act of blocking him, which she had claimed she would do, was enough. I opened the conversation and scrolled to the bottom. Her last message to him was time-stamped just hours before I confronted them in the parking lot. He knows. I can't talk anymore. The simplicity of it struck me first. No apology, no clarity, no definitive ending. Just a statement of circumstance, as if the only reason communication had to stop was because I had discovered it. It was not I don't want this anymore. It was not this is wrong. It was he knows. His reply sat directly beneath it. You don't owe him your entire life. I read that sentence once, then again, then a third time, each repetition sinking deeper. You don't owe him your entire life. Not you don't owe him an explanation. Now you need to figure out what you want. Entire life. The phrasing carried weight, implication, a quiet suggestion that what we had built together was some kind of debt she was unfairly paying rather than a choice she had made freely. That sentence echoed in my head long after I set the phone back down exactly where I had found it. It followed me into the morning, into the way she moved around the kitchen pretending things were stabilizing. It threaded through every conversation we had about rebuilding trust, about counseling, about focusing on Harper. Because underneath all of it was that idea planted by someone else, that I was something she did not owe. For days I carried that line with me. At work, driving, lying awake at night. I imagined him typing it, imagined the tone behind it. Was it reassuring? Was it manipulative? Was it romantic in his mind, positioning himself as an alternative to a life he framed as obligation? The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that their connection had grown beyond casual flirtation. That sentence was not written by a detached consultant offering career advice. It was written by a man who believed he had a claim. A week passed. She told me she had blocked him everywhere. She showed me his contact marked as blocked in her phone, showed me that he no longer appeared in her followers list. She said she had cut it off completely, that she chose our family without hesitation. She cried again, softer this time, as if the tears were part of a ritual of repair. I wanted to believe her because the alternative was exhausting. Then my phone buzzed one afternoon with a number I did not recognize. I almost ignored it, assuming it was spam, but something made me open it. The message was brief. She came to see me, said she needed to say goodbye properly. There was no name at the top, but I did not need one. The tone alone told me who it was. My stomach dropped in a way that felt numb rather than sharp this time, like my body had run out of adrenaline and settled into something colder. Properly. That word landed with the same hollow force as closure had in the parking lot. Properly suggested deliberation. It suggested something more than a rushed conversation in a public lobby. It suggested intention, perhaps even intimacy. It implied that whatever goodbye she claimed to have given in front of me had not been the full version. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. I did not ask for details. I did not threaten. I simply absorbed the fact that she had lied again. Because if she had truly blocked him, he would not have had the ability or the desire to reach out to me. If she had truly ended it in that parking lot, there would have been no need for a proper goodbye. When I confronted her with the message later, she did not deny seeing him again. She admitted she had gone back. She said she felt she owed him a clearer ending than the chaos of that day had allowed. She insisted it was only a conversation. She insisted nothing physical happened. She insisted she needed to close the door in a way that felt final. But all I heard was the pattern. First, the fake profile was harmless. Then it was about feeling seen. Then it was about Ethan specifically. Then it was just career advice. Then it was closure in a hotel parking lot. Then it was a proper goodbye. Each layer peeled back revealed another beneath it. The message on my phone remained open long after our conversation ended, those few words burning into my memory. You don't owe him your entire life. She came to see me. Properly. In that moment, whatever fragile structure we had been trying to rebuild felt like it cracked beyond repair. Not because of a single act, not because of a single lie, but because of the accumulation. Because every promise to stop had been followed by another concealed step. Because every boundary I thought existed had been quietly moved. Lying in bed that night, inches away from her, but feeling miles apart, I realized something fundamental had shifted. It was no longer just about whether she had crossed a physical line. It was about the fact that she had chosen, repeatedly, to protect a connection with him at the expense of honesty with me. And that realization broke whatever was left. After I showed her the message from Ethan and watched her try to construct yet another explanation around it, she finally admitted what I already knew, that she had gone back to him because texting was not enough closure, because she felt their connection deserved a proper ending that was not rushed or interrupted, because she needed to look him in the eye one last time. She said it quietly, almost defensively, as if the reasoning made it less damaging. That was the moment something inside me stopped reacting. There was no spike of anger, no sharp wave of betrayal. There was just a dull, spreading numbness that settled into my chest and stayed there. It was not the admission itself that broke me. It was the calmness with which she justified it. The idea that she believed she owed him something final and meaningful while our marriage was collapsing under the weight of her choices revealed a priority I could not unsee. I realized that every time I thought we had reached the bottom, there had been another layer beneath it, another version of the truth waiting to surface. I stopped trying to argue. I stopped raising my voice. I simply listened and felt something detach internally, like a rope that had been pulled too tight for too long, finally snapping without sound. 3 days later, she packed a suitcase. There was no dramatic fight leading up to it. No shattered dishes or slammed doors. Just a quiet understanding that space was no longer optional. She said she thought it would be best if she stayed with her sister in Ann Arbor for a while, that maybe distance would give both of us clarity. She folded her clothes carefully, methodically, placing them into the suitcase as if preparing for a long business trip rather than stepping out of her marriage. She took about half of what was in the closet, leaving the rest hanging there like a reminder of a life paused mid-sentence. Before she left, she wrote a note and placed it on the kitchen counter, even though she had already told me everything out loud. The note said she needed to figure out who she is without pretending. The phrasing echoed her earlier justifications, the idea that somewhere along the way she had been playing a role instead of living authentically. I read that line several times after she drove away, trying to understand where that left me and where that left Harper. Our daughter noticed the change immediately, even though we tried to cushion it with careful words about Mommy staying with Aunt Claire for a little while. Harper is 7, old enough to sense tension, but too young to grasp the complexity of emotional betrayal. She asked simple questions that felt impossible to answer. Why is Mommy not home for bedtime? Why is Mommy not at breakfast? Why does Mommy not pick me up from school? The one that undid me came during a drive to school a week after Megan left. Harper was sitting in the back seat, kicking her legs lightly against the seat, and she asked why Mommy stopped singing in the car. Megan used to sing constantly while driving, off-key but enthusiastic, turning even short trips into something playful. The silence in the car had become heavy since she left, and Harper noticed the absence of that small, ordinary joy. I looked at her in the rearview mirror and felt the weight of not having an answer that would not fracture something inside her. I told her Mommy was just going through a hard time and needed space. That was not because of her, that grown-ups sometimes have things to figure out. The words felt insufficient, thin against the reality, but they were all I could offer. Weeks passed in a strange, suspended rhythm. Megan called regularly, spoke to Harper every night, tried to maintain normalcy through screens and scheduled visits. She told me she had started therapy, that she realized she had been chasing validation in unhealthy ways, that she needed to understand why she risked everything for attention and affirmation. She said she was trying to fix herself, not just for me, but for our daughter and for her own sense of identity. When we spoke privately, her voice carried a mix of regret and uncertainty. She asked if there might be a someday, for us, if I could imagine a version of the future where we rebuilt what was broken. She did not demand a guarantee. She did not pressure. She simply asked whether the door was permanently closed. I wanted to give her something definitive, something that would either free her or reassure her. But honesty was all I had left, and honesty meant admitting I did not know. Love does not evaporate on command. Despite everything, I still cared about her. I still remember the years before this unraveling, the shared jokes, the late-night conversations, the ordinary tenderness that once felt unshakable. That love lingered, stubborn and complicated. But alongside it was something else that felt just as real. Safety had disappeared. Every promise she made now carried the shadow of previous ones that had been broken. Every reassurance felt fragile. The foundation that once felt solid had been cracked repeatedly, and even with therapy and apologies and distance, I could not pretend those cracks were cosmetic. Safety is quieter than love. It is the confidence that what you are told aligns with reality, that you are not being edited out of someone's life while sitting in the next room. Without it, love feels exposed and unstable. So when she asked about a someday, I told her I could not promise that. I told her I needed time, not just to cool off, but to understand whether I could ever feel secure again. She cried softly on the other end of the phone, not dramatically, just the sound of someone facing consequences they never fully believed would arrive. At night, after Harper was asleep and the house felt too large for two people, I would sit in the living room and think about how quickly a life can shift. A few months earlier, I had believed our biggest concerns were school schedules and work stress. Now we were navigating separation, therapy, and the possibility that our family might never look the same again. I still loved her, but I no longer felt safe with her, and that difference changed everything. It has been 4 months since she packed that suitcase and drove to Ann Arbor. 4 months since the house shifted from tense to hollow. 4 months of learning how to exist in a version of my life I never planned for. Time did not fix anything in a dramatic, cinematic way, but it dulled the sharpest edges. The constant adrenaline of discovery faded. The sleepless nights became less frequent. What replaced them was something steadier and quieter, a kind of clarity that only comes after the chaos burns out. Megan comes every weekend to see Harper. At first, those exchanges were awkward and fragile, like we were handling glass between us. Now they're calmer. She pulls into the driveway at the same time every Friday evening, steps out of her car with a small overnight bag and that tentative half-smile that seems to ask for permission without using words. Harper runs to her immediately, arms open, all uncomplicated love and excitement. And for those moments, I step back and let them have their space. Megan looks different now, not physically in any dramatic way, but in her posture, in the way she carries herself. The restless energy that once hovered around her has softened. She seems less performative, less like she is trying to project a version of herself outward. There are no secret accounts anymore. I checked at first, I will not pretend I did not, but there were no hidden usernames, no alternate personas waiting to be uncovered. The location pings, when I look, are unremarkable. Grocery stores, her sister's house, a therapy office on Tuesday afternoons. She talks about therapy openly now, about unpacking why she felt invisible inside a life that by most standards was stable and loving. She admits that somewhere along the way she confused being needed with being seen, that she mistook routine for erasure. She says she is learning to sit with discomfort instead of running toward attention to drown it out. When she speaks like that, there is less defensiveness in her tone and more reflection. A few weeks ago, after Harper had fallen asleep on the couch between us during a movie, Megan looked at me in the quiet glow of the television and said she never stopped loving me. She did not say it dramatically. She did not reach for my hand. She just stated it like a fact she had finally sorted out inside herself. And I believe her. That is the complicated part. I believe that she loved me even while she was building a separate world online. I believe she loved me while she was laughing with Ethan in that cafe, while she was seeking closure that excluded me, while she was typing messages that suggested I was an obligation rather than a partner. Love was present. It just was not enough to anchor her when her sense of identity started to slip. Love was never the clean dividing line between us. Honesty was. Honesty is what unraveled. It was the small edits to reality, the cropped photos, the half-truths about meetings, the justifications layered on top of each other until the original story was unrecognizable. It was the choice to protect a connection with another man by withholding the full truth from me repeatedly. Without honesty, love becomes unstable. It floats without weight. Right now, we are still separated. There are no lawyers involved, no official paperwork filed. We have not moved toward reconciliation either. We exist in a kind of in-between space, co-parenting with care, speaking respectfully, testing whether trust can regrow in soil that has already been disturbed. Some days the possibility feels distant. Other days it feels faintly within reach, like something fragile that could either strengthen or crumble depending on the next few steps. I do not hate her. That surprises people when they find out pieces of what happened. There was a period where anger flared hot and bright, but it did not sustain itself. Anger requires energy, and eventually I ran out of the kind that burns. What remains is awareness. Awareness of how subtle dissatisfaction can morph into secrecy if left unspoken. Awareness of how easy it is to curate a version of yourself online that feels more exciting than the steady reality of marriage and parenthood. Awareness that betrayal does not always begin with the intention to replace someone. Sometimes it begins with the inability to recognize yourself in a mirror of your own life. I have thought a lot about that sentence Ethan sent her, about not owing someone your entire life. It used to echo with accusation. Now it sits differently. Marriage is not a debt. It is a choice made repeatedly. Somewhere along the way, Megan stopped choosing consciously and started drifting. Instead of confronting that internal shift with honesty, she sought external validation to fill the gap. Sometimes people do not cheat because they have found someone better. Sometimes they cheat because they have lost track of who they are and mistake attention for identity. They reach for affirmation instead of introspection. They tell themselves it is harmless until it no longer is. Understanding that does not undo the damage. It does not magically restore the safety that disappeared, but it reframes the story in a way that is less about competition and more about fracture. For months in, I am not consumed by rage or desperation. I am not rushing toward divorce papers or reconciliation vows. I am simply present with what is real. I still love her. I also remember clearly what it felt like to stand in that hotel parking lot and realize I had been the last to know about my own marriage. Sometimes that memory is enough to keep me cautious. Sometimes clarity hurts less than hope. And sometimes the realization that someone you love was lost inside themselves, not necessarily chasing someone else, is still enough to break everything you thought was secure.